Well, this is taking frickin' forever to dry. Hello again, team. It's Jess or JashiiCorrin, and welcome back for my August 2020 plan with me. As can be expected, today I'm setting up for August in my bullet journal, but before we get into that, as per usual, we're just going to have a look at how July went. So as you'll remember from my last monthly plan with me, my theme for July was science. As I'm using the Archer and Olive Neapolitan journal, this was also done in the craft paper section. So we have my splash page, my monthly log and task list, my mood and habits trackers, my steps tracker and memories and media page. This one isn't quite finished being filled in. The productivity tracker. And after this we're into my weeklies. So we have the first weekly for July, second weekly for July, third weekly, and then after this we actually got to the end of the craft paper section. So I have some notes here for a book that I'm reading. But my weekly for the week coming, which is still mainly in July, is actually at the back of my journal, because it was more important to me to have everything on the craft paper rather than fitting everything into one section and having things chronologically. So that one's just back here. For August though, I'm going to be going back to the first black section of this Neapolitan journal. And before we jump into it, just a reminder that any of the equipment I use in today's setup is linked in the description box below. If my pencil sketches didn't already give it away, my theme for August is Harry Potter. To fit in with my theme for the month, I of course wanted to use the Harry Potter font, but I wasn't really prepared to draw all of those letters out by myself. It certainly isn't a lettering style I'm overly familiar with. What I decided to do instead was use a trick that I've used before and print my headers from the computer onto an old brown paper bag. To do this, I first started by finding the Harry Potter font on the internet, and then once I found one I liked, I just downloaded it to my computer so I could use it in Microsoft Word. After measuring up the space that I wanted each header to fill, I then inserted an appropriately sized table into Microsoft Word and then just typed in each of the headers. Making sure to pre-measure each section and then using an appropriately sized table means that when it comes to printing this, I'm going to have really good guidelines that I can cut along to keep each of my headers nice and uniform. Once my headers were all typed up, it was then time to prepare my printing paper. As I mentioned, I just printed these onto a paper bag, but that isn't really a paper size that most printers are familiar with, from my understanding. What I did to get around this was just cut the paper bag to be a bit smaller than a regular piece of printer paper, and then carefully washi tape them together, making sure that the paper bag laid nice and flat. Then my headers just printed directly onto the bag, which I could cut up, or in this case rip, and then attach into my journal with double-sided tape. Doing this just adds another little decorative element to my page, and it meant that all of my headers would be consistent and uniform. Plus, it's just way easier than trying to draw the letters out yourself. In terms of decoration in this month's setup, I wanted to keep it relatively simple. There are some amazing Harry Potter themed bullet journal spreads out there, with heaps of intricate and detailed decoration, which is honestly gorgeous, but outside the kind of realm of my capabilities. Also, as I'm using the Blackout pages this month, I'm having to rely on gel pens, which aren't really known for their quick drying time, so I didn't want to have a whole heap of detailing in any decoration I was doing. Instead, I'm mainly using outlining for any doodles. As you can see on the cover page here, I've gone with a stylized silhouette of Harry's glasses and scar, making good use of my circle stencil. I also put a border on the page to make it look like an old piece of parchment, which is something that I repeated for every page in the setup to make them all tie together. You may remember something similar from May last year, where I did a magic theme in my journal. In that theme, I was intentionally making sure not to do anything Harry Potter related, because I wanted to have a dedicated Harry Potter theme at some stage. After colouring Harry's scar in gold, the cover page was done and it was on to the monthly log. As always, because I think it's valuable sharing the time taken with you guys, the cover page took 14 minutes from first touch of the pen to final erasings. Do remember that this doesn't include the sketching in time, but it does include an awful lot of time just sitting there and waiting for the ink to dry. If this was done on regular paper with a pen that isn't a gel pen, it certainly would not have taken quite as long. As you can see, this month I'm going with a similar layout to what I had in July, where I've just got a vertical monthly on the left-hand page and then a space for a task list on the right. In terms of timing, the monthly log took about 5.5 minutes, whereas the task list took closer to 9. Following the idea of using simple decorations, you can see at the bottom of the task list here, I've just drawn the silhouette of Hogwarts. Drawing just the silhouette of something, especially something like this, which has a really distinctive shape, is a really nice way to simplify your drawings. For the longest time, I was actually really apprehensive about trying to do a Harry Potter theme. As I mentioned, a lot of the examples out there for Harry Potter bullet journal layouts are really detailed and fairly intimidating. They're gorgeous, but they're outside of the range of my current abilities. This is certainly an instance where comparison could have been the thief of joy. Super detailed decoration is only one way to decorate. In this setup, not only for my own sanity, but also for a bit of contrast, I wanted to have decoration which was distinctly from the world of Harry Potter, but was still fairly achievable for people who don't excel in drawing. So making use of silhouettes, and printing things from the computer, and tracing, and simple but decorative borders, that kind of stuff. With all that said, we are now on to the most time-consuming page in my setup, the mood tracker. Clocking in at just under an hour, this one took far longer than any of the other pages I did, and that's all down to drying time. Because the decoration on this one included a lot more ink, it meant that I had a lot of drying time to make sure I didn't smudge anything. Finalizing what I wanted to do on this mood tracker page was one of the hardest choices there was in this setup, because there's just so many different things you could go with. I've seen people do flying keys, colouring the feathers on the wings of a snitch, Bertie Bott's every flavoured beans, Dobby with a bunch of socks. There are so many possibilities. The main reason I decided to go with this one is because it's a bunch of simple geometric shapes just put together. And given how long this page took, I'm glad I didn't go with anything more intricate. This one is based on the Hogwarts house points counter. As the month proceeds, each day I'll add to whichever counter aligns with my mood for that day, filling from the bottom upwards. As I'm a Ravenclaw, that will represent the best mood for the day, and as I like things in colour order, it will go from left to right, so best mood to worst mood, Ravenclaw, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, and then Gryffindor. Because I'm curious, what Hogwarts house are you in? As I said, I'm a Ravenclaw, but when I first took the sorting quiz on Pottermore, I was actually a hat stall between Ravenclaw and Gryffindor, similar to Professor McGonagall. That was quite a while ago now though, and unlike the true sorting hat, which certainly doesn't make mistakes, taking the Pottermore quiz nowadays, I'm still very much a Ravenclaw, but my secondary house is Slytherin. I'd also be curious to know, is there anyone watching who isn't really a fan of Harry Potter? The majority of people I know certainly are fans, but I also know it isn't necessarily for everyone. For what it's worth, from memory, I don't think I've even read beyond the 5th book. I know for a fact I haven't read the 7th, but I can't quite remember if I've read the 6th. For all of the gold that I'm using on my pages, that was done with the gold 1.5 size Faber-Castell Pitt Artist Pen. I have a couple of these metallic pens in a variety of colours, and I'm excited to get to try them out this month. After my mood tracker, we have my habit tracker. This was the second most time-consuming page for this setup, taking about 30 minutes. This was for a couple of reasons. 1, decoration. 2, the aforementioned need for drying time. And 3, mistakes. Thankfully on the Blackout paper, most written mistakes can be easily fixed by just going over them with a black pen. Some mistakes are a little harder to fix though. Here you'll see me lay down the header for my habit tracker in the incorrect place. Thankfully I was able to pull this up without ripping my page too much, and the section that I did rip is just under the header now anyways. As my mum says, measure twice, cut once. Same thing goes for laying down stickers. make sure you know where it's supposed to go before you stick it down. For the decoration on this page, I wanted to draw a bunch of envelopes, similar to the start of the first book or film, where Harry's receiving all of those letters to say that he's been accepted into Hogwarts. To keep the background letters a relatively consistent size, I used my Mathomat stencil to pencil in some rectangular shapes and then roughly traced around these using my white pen, then putting in the internal lines to make them look like envelopes. The boxes I'm using to track my habits I just made on the computer and again printed onto a paper bag, making use of the Harry Potter font to write out each habit. To fill the 2 blank spaces we have left on this page, I wanted to include some doodles of owls. But I'm not really all that confident in drawing owls, so today I figured I'd take the opportunity to show you how I trace images in my Archer and Olive. Because the paper is so thick in the Archer and Olive, traditional tracing, where you put the image that you want to trace behind the page you're drawing on, doesn't really work. Because the pages are so thick, you just can't see through them to see an image on the other side of the page. To trace these owl drawings that I have here, I first cut them to size so that I knew they'd fit into the space that I was using, and then flipped the paper over and coloured in the space where the image was, just using a regular pencil. Something to be careful with here is making sure that you completely cover the backside of that image. Then all I needed to do was secure the image in place just using a little bit of washi tape, or I just used the sticky section of a post-it note, and then just trace around the outline of the image, again using pencil. The pressure that I apply on this side of the paper will transfer the pencil on the back of the paper to my notebook, which means when I remove the image, I end up with a traced outline that I can then go over with my pen. This is a really handy trick, and I honestly recommend it. Sometimes printing out and sticking in images isn't really the kind of aesthetic we're going for in our journal, but this can be a nice way to include doodles that you're not very comfortable with drawing yourself. After drawing in my perched owl with a white gel pen, I then did the same process for my flying owl. So cutting the paper to size, filling in the back of the paper with a pencil, securing it to the page, tracing over it, and then filling that in with pen as well. As I said, this process can be really helpful, especially on paper like the Archer and Olive, where it's just too thick to be able to see through it. I'd also just like to say that there is no shame in tracing things. Sometimes when you want decoration in your journal and you're not confident in your ability to execute it to a level that you're going to be happy with, tracing can be very useful. Of course, it is always important to give appropriate credit though. Links to the reference images that I used in my setup can all be found in the description box below. Also, if you wanted some more inspiration for Harry Potter themed bullet journal layouts, I have a link to my related Pinterest board down there as well. As the title suggests, here we have my steps tracker, and on the right hand page I have space to record my memories. These pages took 4 and 2 minutes respectively, so certainly the quickest for this setup. And thus concludes my Harry Potter themed monthly setup. And for the final flip through we have the splash page, my monthly log and task list, mood tracker and habits tracker, and a steps tracker and memories page. I'm quite excited to use these spreads and interested to see how using the Blackout pages for a full month goes. And as per every month, I would love to know, what is your theme for August? Thank you for watching, team. If you liked today's video, please do make sure to give it a big thumbs up, and if you wanted to see more from me, feel free to go check out one of my other videos. Until next time, bye!